on Israel. Good morning, everyone. If you're just tuning in, I'm Kira Phillips, and we're so glad that you're with us as we continue to follow breaking news throughout the day. Explosions lighting up the sky as Iran launches hundreds of drones and cruise missiles in retaliation for that Israeli strike on Iran's consulate in Syria. And Israel now vowing to respond. But the question is how and when. Israel convening its war cabinet today to consider its options. Iran says it has no intention of launching more attacks, but won't hesitate to protect itself against new aggression. Iran's envoy to the UN warning that this is a conflict between Iran and Israel and that America should just stay away from it. As for President Biden, he says it'll be up to Israel to decide how to respond.
They showed last night an incredible military capability on their own, but certainly in concert with friends. They also showed Iran that Israel does have friends.
You know, this is American taxpayer dollars. It's not only goes to this. I mean, they're still trying to get that infrastructure thing going on for Americans. But what's always sure to happen is some other money and funding going on constantly, which is here's what the regular story is. It's predictable, you could say.
John Kirby talking about how President Biden has pledged unwavering support for Israel, calling a meeting of the G7 leaders this afternoon. We'll let you know exactly what develops there. We have full team coverage for you today, starting with our Britt Clennett, who was there last night until now when the skies of Jerusalem lit up.
Let me know if the audio is good.
Israel saying it thwarted a major attack overnight from Iran with the help of the US. The first ever strikes directly from Iranian soil on Israel. Iran launching a barrage of more than 300 missiles and attack drones, most shot down by the IDF and US before entering Israeli territory, but not all.
Yeah, this is your tax dollars also.
Explosions lighting up the night sky over Jerusalem. The sound of emergency sirens piercing the air, warning people to seek shelter from the ongoing assault. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with a message on social media this morning. We intercepted, we blocked, together we will win. Last night, Netanyahu saying we are prepared for any scenario, both in defense and attack. The IDF saying they intercepted the majority of the projectiles with over 90% success rate. One Arab-Israeli girl was critically injured in an attack in southern Israel.
This is a severe. You know, this is interesting because, you know, not only are U.S. forces in the region, which taxpayer dollars pay for, you know, but Israeli forces, you know, and U.S. American tax dollars also help fund what the Israeli military does as well, you know.
Severe and dangerous escalation. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are at the highest.
You could say 1/3 of this is Iranian, right? Essentially.
Level of readiness.
U.S. armed forces helped to shoot down dozens of objects launched at Israel, according to ABC sources. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem lifting its shelter-in-place order, saying that the threat from missiles and drones has diminished. Iran says its attack was to avenge Israel's strike near an Iranian consulate in Syria last week, leaving
an Iranian consulate in Syria. Okay, so let me see something here real quick. Iranian consulate, YouTube. Let me try to see what that looks like since I haven't actually seen it, but I heard of this happening. But let's see here. Iranian consulate in Syria attacked. Let me see. Damn, can y'all hear me? Let me check. Okay, the audio's there. Now, let me see something, y'all. Iran declares attack, right. But where are the images? I think it must be this one. So, all right, 2 seconds. Let me pull this one up real quick. Boom. It's this one right here, right? It's this one. Boom. All right. No, it's not this one. I'm sorry, y'all. It's this? Right. There it is. What's wrong with me? Here we go. It's this one. All right.
To the news hour. There is an escalation of tension in the Middle East tonight, beginning in Damascus, Syria.
Earlier today, warplanes attacked a building inside Iran's consulate complex there and killed some of the most senior members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. And tonight, there are reports of new attacks on international ships in the Red Sea.
You know what? I wonder what the attack looked like. You don't really get to see what the attack really looked like. You see the Iranian attack in video format with the bombs, you know, the drones in the air, drones being hit down. By the way, they say they destroyed 99% of the drones. But in any case, you get to see and hear what that sounds like, right? But here it's just a picture.
Southern Israel. Nick Schifrin is here now, has been following all of this. So, Nick, let's begin with Damascus. What do we know about what happened there this morning?
An official with knowledge of the operation tells me that Israel attacked inside Damascus, killing 3 senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders, including Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi. That is Zahedi there. This is the most significant strike against the IRGC since the U.S. killed Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani. You can actually see Soleimani there on the left in the suit. And this photo shows a lot in this photo as well. Zahedi was extremely important to Iran's efforts in both Syria and Lebanon. That is actually Qasem Soleimani's successor right there. Zahedi was the point man with Iran-backed Hezbollah, who oversaw financing in both Syria and Lebanon, as well as shipments of Iranian weapons into Syria and Lebanon. Also killed was Zahedi's deputy, Mohammed Hadi.
Don't you think it's interesting that they don't show the attack for this one? The consulate in Syria, the Iranian consulate in Syria. You don't see the attack footage, the bombs or anything like that. But look, let's just go back now and then switch to today, right? And here we go. And continue.
16 people dead, including 2 generals of the Revolutionary Guard. People seen celebrating in the streets of Tehran amid Iran's assault on Israel. President Biden scrapping his weekend plans to return to the White House. Seen here meeting with his national security team in the Situation Room. Biden also reaffirming his pledge to help Israel in their defense, hopping on a call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, telling him overnight Israel demonstrated a remarkable capacity to defend against and defeat even unprecedented attacks. The leaders of the G7 meeting later today over video conference to coordinate a response to this weekend's attack.
I wonder if I will be able to find any of the attack footage for the Syrian embassy, the Iranian Syrian embassy in Damascus that was hit by Israeli, what did they say, aircraft, I believe. So this is like, how many days ago was this? This is just, oh, this is an update, 2 hour, right. Hold on, let me see. What is the other one? The other one was, this is, what, a week ago? 2 weeks ago, 12 days ago, 2 weeks ago. Okay. All right, it's 2 weeks ago. So let's continue.
Planet joining me now from Tel Aviv for more. So, Britt, the Israeli War Cabinet has convened for this meeting. What can you tell us about the latest, just on a potential response, and how far is Netanyahu willing to go?
Yeah, Kira, Netanyahu is convening the War Cabinet now to discuss the Israeli response. Some are urging Netanyahu not to respond immediately, as some on the far right calling for a major military response. It's unclear where Netanyahu stands, but any Israeli response, Kira, could trigger another round of attacks from Iran. Tehran has made that very, very clear. The danger of escalation, Kira, and an all-out war then becomes very real.
So, while I have you, Britt, just watching you last night and through the night, and the way you described the skies of Jerusalem just lighting up, now that you've had a chance to maybe get a few minutes of sleep, wake up this morning and continue your coverage, your thoughts, your reflections from what you observed last night until this morning, where we are wondering what could happen next.
Yeah, look, it was a long night. It was a tense night. And I think people woke up this morning thinking, okay, what was that? Reflecting on what exactly happened. Obviously, you know, we saw around 99% success rate, and that helped alleviate some fears and the damage.
I wonder how many Americans really are concerned about this at all. Like, I mean, are Americans in a position to be concerned about other places in the world, you know? I'm sure some are, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to be, because it just means you're conscious of stuff. But I'm talking about the average American. Like, how likely do you think a person would have a decent amount of time to concern themselves in foreign, conflicts, for example?
Damage caused was minimal, but look, it is still tense. I spoke to people on the streets of Tel Aviv, on the streets of Jerusalem before this strike, and they did seem kind of unfazed, and that really took us aback, because we were saying, there are all signs pointing towards a strike.
Damn, did you hear that? They unfazed.
And they kind of said, well, if you're in Israel, you're kind of used to this violence or this lingering threat. But I think now it's really hit home. People have had to run into their bunkers to take cover. Usually in most cities in Israel, you get about a minute and a half to run into that bunker. But look, as I described last night, it was quite a sight. It was quite scary at times. You saw those flashes of light dotted all around the night sky, and those air raid sirens that wailed and wailed, and we've heard them in other conflict zones that we've been into. But certainly, it never gets old. It's always quite terrifying when you start hearing that, and then when you see those flashes in the sky. So I think there's mixed feelings, but certainly there are fears that there could be a back and forth now between Iran and Israel, and fears that, as I say, this could escalate in into something far bigger and scarier.
Morning. G7 leaders are set to speak to. Thanks so much for joining us on this busy Sunday morning. G7 leaders are set to speak today following the first direct attack from Iran on Israel, and amid fears of further escalation in the region. The Israeli military says it intercepted nearly all drones and missiles overnight with help from the U.S., the U.K., and Jordan. The IDF says more than 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles were fired from Iran. Retaliation, Iran says, for the recent killing of top Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has convened his war cabinet and says he will decide on how to respond. Iran is warning that its response will be larger if Israel retaliates. So let's bring in Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moed. Nice to see you, Ambassador.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What's the latest you can tell us about the attacks that took place overnight? Nothing got into Israel at all. Was there any damage at all?
There was some damage, some minor damage that was inflicted on some places in Israel, including one airbase in the southern part of the country, but no major damage. We have to remember this is the biggest attack, airborne attack by a country against any other country in the world. And as you are showing right now and pointing out, this is an attack of an Islamic State on the third holiest place for Islam, which was protected by the Jewish state's Iron Dome defense system. We will not allow these places to be attacked. We will not allow any part of Israel to be attacked, because we face this monster called Iran, and we know that we have to keep the peace and stability in the region against their ongoing efforts, either through proxies, through Hamas on the 7th of October, Syria, Iraq. We've seen it also, of course, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Yemen, all around us. They are trying to inflict damage on Israel and actually to destabilize the Middle East. And actually, it's an attack on the global world, on the global scene.
Well, you talked about the different groups, the proxies that Iran has used in the past on Israel. But this, as you point out, the first direct attempt from Iranian territory itself. Is that troubling for Israel, that this has perhaps changed the nature of what could happen in the future?
The scope of this attack has changed something that is not just for us, but I think also for the entire world. We see something that we've warned against throughout this war we are waging against one of its proxies, against Hamas. We've seen now what Iran is and what Iran is willing to do in order for them to achieve their goal, and that is to eliminate the state of Israel and actually to destabilize the whole world. They're extremely dangerous. And so this attack actually constitutes a wake-up call for the global scene, for the international community to understand that Iran's need to be faced strongly right now First and foremost, the first initial step would be to designate the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. That needs to happen now. It has to happen today. We have to face Iran's nuclear capabilities. They are extremely dangerous, and this is really a wake-up call for all of us. We have to act.
And you're saying that about the IRGC because Canada has yet to designate that group as a terrorist organization, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and would you expect to see movement on that given what has happened over the past 24 hours then?
Of course. Well, what else do we need to see? We see that Iran is using all its power against Israel, but also against the region. It's not just Israel that responded. We responded together with our allies in the region and beyond, because we all understand that the threat that we are facing right now from Iran is huge, and it needs to be addressed as forcefully as possible immediately.
Do you think an attack on Israel is from Iran, Mr. President?
I want to get this information for my expectations sooner than later.
Mr. President, to Iran in this moment.
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you.
Said his country had no intention of continuing its military operation and called the attacks self-defense. Earlier this morning, I spoke with retired U.S. Colonel Peter Mansour, former executive officer to U.S. General David Petraeus in Iraq, about how this might change what is unfolding in the Middle East. Retired Colonel Peter Mansour, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
When we last spoke, you actually told me you thought it would be a miscalculation for Iran to enter this conflict. First of all, do you see this as Iran entering the conflict, and how significant is this direct attack?
Well, this Iranian attack is in retaliation for an Israeli attack on a couple of their personnel in Syria. And so I don't necessarily see this as Iran entering the conflict unless Israel retaliates again on Iranian territory. I think this is Iran sending a message that attacks on its personnel won't be tolerated and there will be consequences, but I don't think they intend for this to be the start of a new war.
So if it was a retaliation or a show of force, do you think they achieved that objective?
Well, we have to take them at their word. They say they achieved their objective, although only 3 drones and missiles actually hit anything.
Yeah.
But I think they're satisfied with the results. And as long as Israel doesn't retaliate again, then I think this is the end of it.
So let's talk about that then, the likelihood that Israel might retaliate. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations happening between Washington and Israel right now.
Do you guys believe that estimation? I mean, what do you think about the estimation that he just made?
What do you think is the likelihood? What would that look like if they decided to do something?
Well, I think Israel has more wars than it really needs at present, and it would be wise for it not to retaliate. The United States is undoubtedly asking Israel not to retaliate, because the next step will be for Iran to attack not just Israeli targets in the region, but U.S. targets as well. Mm-hmm. So this back and forth is going on, no doubt, between Tel Aviv or Jerusalem and Washington, and those discussions are playing out.
The fact that Biden has reportedly told Benjamin Netanyahu, you've got to win here, just walk away from it, and said that the U.S. will not support a war with Iran. Would that have an impact, do you think, on the strategic decisions going forward, or is Prime Minister Netanyahu perhaps more concerned about what's happening domestically?
Well, I think absolutely the feeling in Washington will have an impact on what's happening in Israel. You know, the Israelis have gotten a win with this. They killed 2 top-level IRGC Quds Force commanders. The retaliation slightly damaged the military base, although regrettably it badly injured a young girl, but it was not really a hurtful retaliation to Israel in so many ways. And so if Israel wants a war with Iran, it's going to find itself alone in that conflict. And I don't think that would be wise strategically, politically, or diplomatically.
Would there be a reason for Israel to do that, though? I mean, obviously there's been a shadow war for many decades, and the sort of proxy forces around Israel have caused an enormous amount of pain and conflict for Israel.
So the reason for Israel to retaliate, if you want to make that case, is that this attack was different, that this attack actually originated from Iranian soil, and that Israel therefore needs to establish dominance over Iran and prove to it that it can't attack Israeli territory with impunity from its own territory. So that would be the argument for retaliating.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting it should. I'm just trying to get a sense, obviously, of what that could look like. And I do know that there's also been some conversations around other kinds of response, maybe not militarily. Do you have any sense about what that could mean? Maybe a cyber attack, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it would make much more sense for Israel to use its covert assets in the region to attack Iranian targets. A cyber attack is not out of the question. But I really think the next step here is diplomatic. The G7 is meeting, and if you put Iran under diplomatic pressure, I think that would be the next step that would be the wise strategic move.
Just for people who don't necessarily follow the region as closely as you do, how significant is this? Is this a game changer in terms of where we are, or could it be one, I guess?
Well, it is unique in that this is the first attack that on Israel that has come from Iranian territory. It shows that Iran is serious about this conflict and the axis of resistance against Israel. The other thing, in a military sense, is this sort of attack mirrors what's happening in Ukraine. Russian attacks with missiles and drones in combination. And so we see the fallout from the Ukrainian war here in the Middle East.
Well, I was going to actually ask you about that, and I'll end here. There are a lot of people asking questions about why Ukraine is not equipped the way Israel is, and why it does not get assistance from allies the way Israel did to protect itself from drone strikes. What do you make of that?
Well, Ukraine has a lot of air defense systems that the West has provided.
Yes.
The problem now, clearly and simply, is that the U.S. Congress has not authorized further aid. And hopefully this month it will take that up and actually hold a vote.
Okay. Colonel Mansour, thank you so much for your expertise on this. Appreciate it, sir.
But this was unprecedented. Was the administration surprised in any way by the scale of this attack?
It absolutely was a massive air attack that Iran launched on Israel. We've been watching as closely as we could the intelligence picture. We had a pretty good indication of the size.
They say it was 300 drones sent from Iran, drones.
And the scale and the scope of what Iran was planning.
99% were destroyed, they say.
And that is why, because we had a good sense of what they were going to do and with how much, that's why we were able to really help Israel knock down almost everything that Iran threw at them.
And John, we know that President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke over the phone last night, and there is a report that Biden told Netanyahu that the U.S. will oppose any Israeli counterattack against Iran. Can you confirm that's what was said, and what other context could you provide for that conversation?
That's not an accurate reading of the conversation. The president understands the prime minister runs a government for a sovereign state of Israel, and that they'll decide whether and how they're going to respond to what Iran did last night. We respect that. But again, the president's message to the prime minister was that he knows that the United States stands with Israel. There wasn't just the United States. Other countries also helped Israel defend itself last night. that Israel demonstrated a superior military capability to what the Iranians threw up against them. And that, of course, as we've said many, many times, we don't want to see the situation escalate further. We're not looking for a war with Iran.
So then, do you expect Israel will strike back directly in Iran? And what's the U.S. role now going forward?
I won't speak for the Israelis. That's going to be up to them to decide whether and how they'll respond to this. They showed last night an incredible military capability on their own, but certainly in concert with friends. They also showed Iran that Israel does have friends, that there was a coalition that helps them support themselves. That alone is significant, and of course the damage was extremely light. Again, showing how unified the United States and Israel are in Israel's self-defense.
And Iran warned the U.S. to stay out of this conflict, and yet we saw our assets taking down missiles and drones in the skies. Is there a concern now from the administration that Iran could respond with an attack on the U.S. or U.S. assets?
The president also made clear in that statement last night that he'll do whatever he has to do to protect our troops and our facilities, our people in the region. And we will do that. And we have sent a very clear signal to Iran, privately and publicly, that any attack on our troops and our facilities will have consequences. We're very serious about that. We have not seen any specific threats to our personnel or our facilities, but we're going to stay vigilant to that. Absolutely. But when it comes to defending Israel, again, the president has been very, very clear. Israel is a good friend and an ally, and our commitment to them is ironclad to commitment to helping them defend themselves. And we showed that last night.
You know, an assault launched by Iran against Israel overnight. The Israeli army says more than 300 missiles and drones were fired. Almost all the missiles were intercepted by Israel and the United States. The UK and Jordan also shot down drones. Now, air raid sirens sounded across Israel and explosions were heard in Jerusalem. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says the assault is in retaliation for an attack on its consulate in Syria on April 1st, which killed 16 people, including several Iranian generals. It is the first time Iran has launched a direct military attack on Israel, despite decades of hostilities. Now, there has been widespread international condemnation of the Iranian attack. President Joe Biden repeated the United States' ironclad support for Israel. Secretary General Antonio Guterres criticized what he called a serious escalation by Iran. The UN Security Council has called an emergency meeting. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock also condemned the attack, saying it could plunge the entire region into chaos. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called the assault reckless and vowed to stand up for Israeli security. Authorities have now given the all clear, meaning people no longer need to stay close to air raid shelters. But our correspondent, Amy Isif, says it was a tense and noisy night in Jerusalem.
As you can hear, the sirens are going off. As you can hear, sirens are going off in Jerusalem. You can see Iron Dome is active. The air defense is active in the skies. So we're going to head to a shelter now, but a lot of chaos in the streets, a lot of screaming, people running for cover.
Let's get the very latest from our correspondent, Tanya Kramer, joining us now live from Jerusalem. Tanya, welcome. Tell us the latest about the situation in Israel this morning.
Well, it is quiet for now, but the army says they're remaining on high alert. However, the airspace has reopened. We've been told so. But this comes, of course, for Israelis and Palestinians, waking up after such a night. This is somewhat a different reality after these direct and unprecedented attacks from Iran on Israel. Now, we are hearing more details now also coming in this morning from the Israeli military.
I'm assuming, there's a lot of people, most of my listeners are from the U.S., probably 60, maybe 70%, right? And I'm just curious, how do you feel about this dynamic? It doesn't just affect the U.S., however, but, 70% of the listeners here are from the U.S. So that's what the data says. And I'm just curious, Like, this is a lot of U.S. taxpayer dollars that goes into Israel, but also into the U.S. military over these kind of conflicts. And I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts about these conflicts? Do you think the average American really has time to follow up and know what's going on? Um, what's your thoughts on that? And from my perspective, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some that follow the international news a little closer than others, but either way, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just curious about the thoughts, of the people. Essentially, there's a lot of this conflict between Palestine and Israel has been going on for what, 60 years, maybe more. So 70 years, I think. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but yeah, that's a lifetime essentially, and that's a lot of money when you look over the time. Over time, of course, the value of $1 billion was worth more, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but still, that's a lot of money we're talking about. So, let's hear some more.
Said that over 300 drones and missiles were launched from Iran, but also from other countries, such as from Lebanon. There were rockets from Yemen, but also some from Iraq. They're saying that most were intercepted before they reached Israeli territory by the air defense forces, by a coalition of strategic partners, as the Israeli military has said. And they also said that 99% were intercepted. So with some ballistic missiles, however, reaching and hitting somewhere in Israel. One of them was hitting in, they said, the Nevatim air base in the south. We don't have a full assessment there, but they're saying it was only minor damage, but also a child has been injured, critically injured, potentially by shrapnel. Now, of course, after all this happened, the question is now, what will Israel do? How will they retaliate? How will they respond to this?
That is indeed the big question here, Tanya. What do you think Israel's next move will be? Are there signs that we might see a swift retaliation?
What happens if the U.S. pulls out their support for Israel? Not that that would ever happen, but I don't believe it will ever happen. But what would happen if the U.S. did? What do y'all think will happen? Would things get better or would things get worse? And for who and how? Let me know what you think about that. So, yeah, this is a lot of money, but yeah, and feel free to, if you support Palestine or Israel, I don't really mind. There's people that have different opposing views, so you're going to have that. But me myself, it's really difficult. I mean, because when you compare the death toll of the Palestinians, which is in the 30,000s, I think. Let me just double check that. Let me see here. 2 seconds. Let me see. How many Palestinians have died? They should say that. Yeah, that's 30,000. That's what I thought in Gaza, just over this last conflict. Yeah, so that's horrible when you look at those numbers. And then when you just combine that with the fact that, everything that they lived in has pretty much been destroyed, you have to wonder, is it worth it? Are these kind of things worth it, essentially? And what is it for, but
well, this is, of course, the question right now. There has been also a phone call between US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the course of the night. And there is an indication that the United States, they don't want to see a wider regional escalation coming out of that. They have also said that the US helped actually Israel to take down nearly all of the incoming drones and missiles, and that Israel should see this as a success in a way that they could reboot all those, most at least of those missiles coming in. Now, it will be in the hands now of the war cabinet to decide the next steps. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and we just have to wait and see whether, how they will decide, whether there will be retaliation. And, this could affect, of course, most of the region here. And many don't want to see, of course, a wider escalation.
Tanya, thank you so much for your reporting. That is Tanya Kramer for us in Jerusalem.
Hello, Andrea. Yes.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he will convene the G7 countries to plan a diplomatic response to Iran's attack. Biden announced the meeting after speaking to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone. Now, Biden told Netanyahu Israel demonstrated a remarkable ability to defend against unprecedented attacks, sending a clear message that Israel's security cannot be threatened. Biden also said the U.S. has not seen any attacks on its own troops in the region, but confirmed U.S. forces helped Israel take down nearly all of the drones and missiles launched from Iran. Let's get the perspective from Washington, D.C. and speak to our reporter, Stefan Simons. Stefan, Biden has cut short his weekend trip to Delaware to hold crisis talks with his national security team. We know his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, earlier spoke to his Israeli counterpart. What has the U.S. said publicly about this attack?
Well, of course, the U.S. president, as well as the entire administration, was very, very quickly to stand by Israel officially and with statements. This ironclad standing by Israel quote comes from National Security Council statement, which was given on Saturday. Now, the president has reiterated that this will be a U.S. position, that when Israel is attacked and has to defend itself, the U.S. will do everything it can to support Israel. And so it did during this attack or drone and missile attack by Iran. The U.S. is saying that it shot down itself 70 missiles/drones during this attack and helped Israel by doing so defend itself. But as said by my colleague Tanya out of Jerusalem, the Biden administration is very, very, very keen on really putting a lid on this now. Iran apparently has concluded or has said the UN mission, the Iranian mission, permanent mission at the UN has relatively early on, Saturday still said, okay, that concludes the matter for us. We retaliated. And the Biden administration is now, as we also reported, in telephone calls and communication with Israeli counterparts saying now a return to measured responses is necessary, not a retaliation by Israel, to not escalate this into a wider, full-scale regional conflict.
So let's dig in a little bit more into Washington's support. Of course, support for Israel.
How many of you think that's exactly what it's going to develop into? And do you care if it develops into that type of conflict, a regional conflict? What do you think? I'd like to hear from everybody their opinion on that. Some people think that, hey, why not? Why not invest more money in this? Other people think, okay, is this really our beef? But I'm just curious how many of you all think one way or the
mainstay
other.
of U.S. Foreign affairs over decades. What do you think ironclad support promised here is going to mean in concrete terms?
Two-prong approach, that is, militarily speaking, the United States has many, many assets, Navy assets, air defense assets in the region, Red Sea, Strait of Hormuz, Eastern Mediterranean. This is sophisticated weaponry, fighter jets, and whatsoever. And there will be defensive support for Israel. That doesn't mean boots on the ground, U.S. military engagement with U.S. soldiers anywhere near or close or anywhere in the region there on behalf of Israel or anybody else, but support with military assets, specifically intelligence, geospatial, radar information and intelligence, et cetera, this will come from the United States and will be continuously provided to Israel. That's what that means. On the other hand, it's of course diplomatic support, and that is, and we see already the results of this. it is reaching out to all partners and allies of the United States, not just NATO partners and friends. And in Europe, it also partners and allies in the Middle East, and meaning by this Arab partners. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, those countries, the U.S. is trying to make sure that all of them are on the same page in trying to de-escalate here now, meaning to really prevent a full-scale regional conflict from happening.
Thank you so much. That is DW's Stefan Simons in Washington, D.C. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has praised the Israeli forces for blocking the attack, and he paid tribute to Israel's allies for their support.
Of international reaction coming up to the events over the night. First of all, though, let's take a look at exactly what happened and take a listen to this. These are the sirens over Jerusalem and the explosions in the sky there over Israel. Some 300 drones and missiles fired towards Israel. And the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, saying that 99% of them were taken out of the sky, not just above Israel. These pictures next are from Jordan, allies helping here, the US, the UK, France, among those countries, shooting down objects over airspace outside Israel. Also Syria and Damascus, two similar scenes there. We have a look now at the Iron Dome heading back to Israel, which is the defense mechanism covering much of Israel. Interceptor missiles effectively fired from the ground there, leaving the trails in the sky up towards those drones and missiles. The assessment of the damage from Israel are very limited. No deaths, they say. Some infrastructure at a military base hit and a young girl injured and being treated. We had these pictures coming out of Iran, some government supporters celebrating there. We don't have any wider context for those pictures there. Iran saying this is a retaliation strike for what's widely believed to be an attack by Israel on the consulate in Damascus 2 weeks ago. And let's just show you a map of the region here so you get an idea of the scale of what's happened and potentially what's at stake. You can see Iran there and Israel and the distance between them. This is the very first time a direct attack on Israel from Iranian soil. Well, with me now, Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, as you can see, and our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. We're going to pick through exactly what this means. Jeremy, good to see you. So just tell us where we are, where the region stands right now.
Well, I think the region's looking at the Israeli war cabinet and seeing what it's going to decide to do next. The message coming from Israel's Western allies, particularly the US, also the British, Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, has just said that Britain was also involved in shooting down drones, and he said this is now a time for cool heads. In other words, message to Israel, you've got a victory here, bank it, hang on to it, do not escalate any further, because the risks of escalating, maybe a strike back onto Iranian territory, are very great. Israel has sustained a serious attack, but with a great deal of help from its allies, it has been able to withstand it. It was not a full-on assault in the way that perhaps it would have been had Hezbollah in Lebanon joined in with their massive arsenal of missiles that over the years the Iranians have helped them build up.
And Frank Gardner, if we can start with a similar question to you as well, your broad thoughts on where exactly the region stands now.
Okay, if you imagine a ladder, all right, with a lot of different rungs, we are halfway up that ladder of escalation. Israel could choose to go up it or down it, because right now we've seen a number of escalations, a number of red lines crossed.
What do you all think the reaction from Israel is going to be?
As Jeremy puts it, and this is certainly a red line, and it's the first time Iran and Israel have fired at each other. In this case, Iran shooting directly at Israel. And despite the fact that there is restraint being urged on all sides, Israel's war cabinet is going to found what it calls a significant response. Now, it can do that in a number of ways. It could bide its time, strategic patience. It could hit back at its proxies, Iran's proxies like Hezbollah, as it has done, and others around the region. It could target the exact missile bases from which these drones and missiles were launched in Iran. That would be an escalation. Or it could go even further and do an all-out attack on Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps bases throughout Iran. That would be a major escalation and one that would prompt, I think, a massive Iranian response. And that's not what anybody in the region wants. Everyone's calling for things to calm down now, but I'm not sure that Israel is going to let this one go, as it were.
Okay. Jeremy, can I just get your thoughts on the Iranian foreign minister coming out and speaking basically the lines from Iran, effectively saying that this current action is finished. They described it as a defensive action, but if there are any more attacks, then they will respond. What do you think of the messaging there?
Well, let's just rewind back to the 1st of April. That's when the attack took place on the Iranian diplomatic compound in Damascus, killing senior officers, senior generals, but I think more importantly for the Iranians, hitting ground they consider to be, and legally it is, Iranian soil. The Israelis have made an unconvincing argument that the presence of those officers in the building rendered it not a diplomatic premise, but a military position that it was okay to hit. That is not a convincing argument. So Iran made it very clear that they would respond. Question, how were they going to do it? The suggestion was that perhaps they might try and do something a little bit oblique, something indirect, but they've opted for this full-on attack. Now, the attack did not do a great deal of damage. Was that because they assumed, having signaled so clearly that they were going to do it, that so Israel, the Americans, the Brits and others could get ready? Or was that simply because they're simply not up to hurting Israel with its formidable air defenses along with its allies? So I think where we're at now is a time of great uncertainty. Really, the rules of the game in the Middle East have changed a lot since the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. And now that Iran has, well, first the Israeli strike, Iran's response, what will Israel do next? We are very much in unknown territory here. But certainly, I think it's absolutely clear that if a way is not stopped, is not found to stop this steady escalation into a wider war, all-out war in the Middle East, then it's going to keep on going in that direction, which would be absolutely catastrophic for all concerned.
Okay, Joe, we're going to come back to.
Thank you so much for being with us. Your extensive military experience, based on what you just heard, John Kirby there saying they don't want this conflict to spread further. But what's your feeling about whether that happens?
Well, Janae, Iran doesn't actually have a lot of friends in the world. The Chinese and the Russians have been helpful in various ways, but in the region, they really don't have many friends. Most of the Gulf countries, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, they don't like Iran much either. So it's hard to see how it would spread much farther. The real key here is that the gloves have been dropped. So it's no longer a shadow war.
They don't like each other. That's what the argument is.
Between Israel and Iran. Iran is now going to be vulnerable to Israeli counterattacks, and they are indeed vulnerable. Israel has a much better ability to project power. The Israeli Air Force can own the airspace over Iran. The ships at sea and submarines that Israel has make most of the Iranian shipping and navy vulnerable. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Iran or how Israel reacts to this and what they're able to do. I don't think that they need to rush it. They have some time to think about it and pick the targets, but I do think there will be some sort of response from Israel going forward.
Okay, so we will be watching for a potential response. In terms of the weapons that Iran used, you heard John Kirby there call it a massive air attack. Just how forceful was this?
Yeah, it really, really was remarkable. I think everybody was caught off guard about how many weapons that Iran actually launched at Israel. And if you think about it, Janae, the intercepts of these weapons were done from, say, 100 feet off the ground all the way to the edge of space. That's a remarkable defensive military technology achievement. Much of it was either funded by the U.S. or U.S. technology. Note that almost 1/4 of the weapons that were intercepted last night were done by U.S. forces. Jordanian forces helped out. We believe that maybe the Saudis and the Emiratis may have helped out. So the UK helped out. So there was all sorts of help here for Israel, but a remarkable achievement to have really only one person wounded after almost 330 weapons launched from Iran.
So an unprecedented attack, but relatively minimal damage. So Steve, was this attack calibrated to send a message or really to do damage?
Yeah, the Iranians had been warned to not escalate the situation, maybe to do something that was just at least a notional payback to Israel. This is why I think most people were caught unawares that 300 weapons were launched. That is beyond just a message. That was a true intent to hurt Israel. And so I think that was the surprise here. And I think that the Iranians can't be surprised when the Israelis retaliate in kind.
All right, Colonel Steve Gagnier, thank you so much for being with us this morning to add that context.
The 3 divorces that I had,
it sounds like the same old game, the same old game. Yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting. So what do y'all think about that? Israel and Iran. You think it's possible that they will go into a war right now? If so, why? But if not, why not? I don't think they would. But then again, what is my word worth on this matter? I mean, there's obviously, you know, they have their own reasoning that's might be illogical to other people, you know, and only logical to them and their history maybe, or their situation, their political situation overall. But do you think the U.S. Should be in the middle of this? If so, why? You know, my personal belief is that Americans don't like the reality, but they would hate the alternative. You know, that's my personal view of it. But you know, people will have some different views. I'm sure some people are like, you know, why doesn't the U.S. just stay out of it? It doesn't matter. We could always defend ourselves. We don't have to have so much of a presence overseas, right? But to me, that seems like you're taking the rest of the world to be super friendly, you know, and not power hungry, you know, and the rest of the world, in my view, is also power hungry. You know, they may not have as much power in one country as the U.S. has, but people would like to have that, you know. So yeah, that's my personal view. I appreciate everybody listening, and I'm gonna catch up with y'all later on this evening. Peace.
And you don't know how, say Shady Groove's gonna show you how. Just to move your feet or get out your seat, you got to listen to the sounds of the funky beat. The first thing that we like to say when you're grooving with us, we like to say, hey! To the big brother Smitty and Wood, hey! To everybody from out of Wakefield, hey! To the sweet lady Linda and Lily, hey! Tell me one time, fellas.